We've been creating content for digital signage for close to 15 years now, and have a little bit of experience on the subject. So I'll get going into our presentation. So I got to figure out how to switch slides here. Hang on. My apologies. This is the first one of these that I've done, so I'm a little bit technically challenged. My arrow keys are not forwarding through the slides. Sarah, can you help me out?
Hey Steve, when you run your mouse over the PowerPoint, you should see a little gray arrow pop up.
Oh, there
Or
we
if
go.
you're on a Mac, you can also use the space bar.
There we go.
There it
All
is.
right. You guys see that okay?
Yep.
All right. So, whether you already own a display or you're just starting to shop for one, content matters. We've all heard the very cliche content is king phrase. And while it is somewhat of a cliche, I believe that it is the most important and critical part of any sort of digital signage execution you're considering, including if you already own displays. But certainly, in our opinion, it's the most important decision you need to consider before you even start looking for players and start looking for hardware and all of that, because in many cases, how you create the content is going to dictate what kind of display you want to get and how you're going to run it. So there's probably a whole lot more than 5 points, but for today's purposes, there's 5 major points to consider when making the crucial content decision. First one is, who is your audience? Next one is, what is the audience frequency? What's being communicated? How long people are watching? And who's going to make it? So those are kind of our 5 major points, and I'll get into those now. Who is your audience? So I think this is probably the most critical question you have to ask yourself when you're considering digital signage or the content for it. If you're a retailer, or if you're a museum, or whatever your situation is, if you're a building owner and you want to put something in your lobby, you have to ask yourself, is my audience an existing customer? Are they a new customer? Is it an internal audience? Maybe your digital signage program that you're looking at is supposed to be focused at your internal employees, but the primary question to ask yourself is, who is my audience? And then you also need to know, are they young, are they old, are they female, male? Is there a lot of, I work a lot in Times Square, and in Times Square there's an enormous amount of visual distraction, and so you have to ask yourself, how am I going to stand out in that visual crowd? Or are you one display that's out there all by itself? So you have to ask yourself, who is your audience? Because these things all play into, how do I go about creating content or acquiring content for my digital sign? So the other thing that you need to consider with who is your audience is the frequency that you're going to see them. If you were a grocery store, for instance, and you put digital signage somewhere in your store, you have to realize that customer of yours is going to see this digital display, every week, if not twice or 3 times a week, for a long period. And so it's an awesome opportunity for you to create a relationship with that customer. But if you put the same content up and leave it there for 6 months at a time, you basically wasted your money. So it's really critical, I think, to figure out what is your plan, how are you going to communicate with that client. An alternate scenario is, and this is somewhat the case in Times Square where I do a lot of work, a tourist destination. you could get away with having one really great piece of content in a tourist destination, and the chances are that if your audience is primarily made up of tourists, they may not come back and see that display again for another 10 years or 5 years or something. So in that case, it's not as necessary to create a plan where you're going to change the content, once a week or even twice a week or something like that. Then I would suggest you want to put something together that's really memorable, um, and probably figure out how to create some sort of social media sharing that goes with that content, so that if you were in the situation where your guest isn't going to be seeing the content on a regular basis. So the next thing to consider is what's being communicated. And this is really where you have to, in my opinion, sit down with all of the stakeholders in your company, whether it's the CEO and the marketing department, salespeople. You really need to define what it is your goal is with what you want to communicate to that client, or to that prospective customer. Um, because a lot of times people get digital signage and they just put up something simple and quick, and either it stays there for a long, long time and doesn't get changed, or there's kind of a lack of direction within the company as to what the purpose of the the communication is. And so a lot of digital signage executions that I've seen, they just it's not used to its fullest extent, and it's primarily because people just don't give enough thought to what they want to communicate. Couple examples of what your content communication might be is maybe it's just ambiance. We're working on a project right now where the client is a retailer and their primary goal is just to create an ambiance of a spa-like setting in a retail situation. And so we're going out and shooting a bunch of 4K red footage, of nature footage and things like that, because it's a really, really wide application with 8 screens wide. And so we're going out and shooting some specific stuff for that application. Uh, your message might be branding. It might be just, if you were in a store and you want to reinforce brand, then you're going to put something like that together. It could be a sales message. Your focus could be, do I want to sell something? Do I want to cause people to, we're in this space, increase sales? Well, if that's the case, then you need to examine, how are we going to accomplish that? What are we going to tell people to get them more interested in purchasing the product that's near the display that we have. Interactivity can be a great way to um, get that, whether it's through mobile or through touch or through Connect. There's a lot of motion interactivity that's available these days. So those are just some ideas of, examples of what you're communicating. But it's really important to have a clear and concise idea of what it is you want to communicate. So another really critical um, thing to think about when figuring out what you're going to do for content is, what is my dwell time? How long are people watching my sign? Chances are, unless you're putting, 5 figures, 6 figures into your content and creating a show that's, something that you could sell tickets for, people are glancing at your sign more so than standing there watching it. But it's really critical to know, am I, a situation where I'm a subway platform where people are standing there for 3 to 5 minutes on average, or is it a situation where it's at an airport or something, or somewhere where people are just walking past it and my dwell time is really short? Maybe it's only 15 or 20 seconds. If your digital display was on a road, maybe your dwell time is basically the time it takes from when you can see the sign to when they've gone past it. Maybe that's only 15 seconds. You know, as a content producer, we love those situations where the dwell time is 15 minutes. In Times Square, the average dwell time is 2 hours and 45 minutes. So we've got lots and lots of time to put content up. But it's really critical to know, what that dwell time is going to be, because you wouldn't want to spend a whole bunch of money creating content when your dwell time is only 20 seconds or something, or you wouldn't want to run a loop of content that was 20 minutes long when your dwell time is really short. uh, it would be more important to ask, okay, if I have a short dwell time but my audience is regular, then you'd want to run a really short loop, and change the content on a more regular basis, like a subway platform. Or um, another thing to think about is, like, if you're doing content for a trade show or something like that. um, a trade show is typically, you want to grab their attention, and then get them into the booth. So, figure out how your content is going to do that, but it probably is going to be a fairly short dwell time because people are kind of walking by. Um, let's see. So, how long are people watching? Don't forget to consider the environment. I kind of already covered this. The other thing to think about is how far away your viewer is. The subway platform, for instance, you've got a display that's probably no more than 30, 40 feet away, and your display might be 5 foot by 7 foot or something. Maybe it's only a 42-inch panel, but in any case, your viewer is fairly close, so you don't have to have your copy as big. You also want to think about, when with your environment, how much you can say. A lot of our clients that we've had over the years, they have a small sign and a short dwell time, and they give us a message that is the equivalent to one page out of a book. And it's like, you don't have enough time to tell that much of a story. You need to figure out how to say that, get your message across in fewer words, or do it with pictures. So that's another critical thing to think about. So the other thing to think about is your audience frequency. Covered this a little bit earlier, but um, if your audience frequency um, is, like I was saying before, uh, very very close together, where you've got people showing up once or twice a week versus you know showing up once or twice a year. You want to change how often you change your content with that. Apologize for this. It looks like we have a slide or two out of order here. So the next big, another question that we're always interested in is, who's going to make the content. I think a lot of people, when they get into creating content, they're thinking that they're just going to go online, buy some stock footage, or they're going to have someone in the company do it. But what we've found is that unless you really dedicate an internal person, or you hire a company like ours, we find that the same content ends up being up there for 6 months at a time. One of the things that you can do to get away from that is, you can do what I call automatic content. So there's a lot of companies out there like ScreenFeed or DigiChief that have licensed feeds of entertainment, news, sports related stuff. Um, there's obviously day, date, weather, type of information that you can get. And there's a lot of the players these days have widget based content that you can put in. The only challenge with that content is that it's people see it on their homepage every day, whether they're on Yahoo or MSN. They see it on TV. It's kind of ambient and everywhere, and people kind of tune it out. and real honestly, it doesn't do the job that you probably invested in, in digital signage for. So you have to ask yourself, okay, I want to create some compelling content. Um, be prepared to spend some money on that. Too many people, I think, figure that digital signage is just buying the hardware and then it's done, but there really needs to be a budget allocated towards, creating and refreshing and managing content across whatever, digital sign platform you're undertaking. The other kind of content is, the kind that I'm talking about, where you create it specifically for your application, for your audience, and it's rendered content. And it can be done, anywhere from, a high-end ad agency for tens of thousands of dollars, or it could be done with a small agency like ours, or you can go to Craigslist or some of the other places where you can find After Effects and motion graphic artists, um, that can do that stuff. So those are kind of the options of who's going to create it. Um, just some basic tips for, the actual content itself would be to create, bright, high contrast colors, have the best impact. Once again, this is kind of a function of your viewing audience and how far away they are from the screen and how big the screen is. And one of the slides before showed that, the rule of thumb for copy is 1 inch for every 40 feet of viewing distance. That's for somebody with 20/20 vision. So you kind of have to figure out, once again with dwell time, how much you can say, and you want to make sure that your copy is big enough. Usually you want to stick with sans serif fonts that don't, have a whole bunch of stuff that makes it difficult to read. Um, and the other thing to think about is interaction. These days, it seems to be kind of a buzzword in digital signage, but nobody's really quite sure what that means. The only thing that we've found that is very critical, and then that is to tie in social media to whatever digital signage experience you have, because it leverages that communication at whatever that location is. So that if you can create content that will get people to share, whether it's, a vanity related thing where letting them put their picture up on the screen, or if there's some sort of coupon that they can get using a QR code, or there's a whole bunch of different interactive things that can either be physically interactive through motion-based interaction like a Connect, or it can be with a phone where you tie the phone in with content on the screen. There's a whole bunch of different ideas on what can be done with interactivity. But I think the key with any of those, and this helps you track, your results as well, and that is to tie in social media sharing to your content in one form or another. A little bit about Pixelfire. We're a 15-year-old company that's been creating content for LED, LCD, all kinds of different displays for many, many years in many situations, Times Square, trade shows, digital signage in retail settings and things like that. I think the thing that makes Pixelfire a little bit unique in the world of motion graphic agencies is that our background is in the sign business. We came from the digital sign business before the LED was invented, and had a lot of experience with electronic signs when that meant light bulbs and monochromatic displays. And so we kind of come at it from a different approach than the average video company, yet we still have all those same services and features that a traditional post house would have. Some of our clients are some of the big brands of the world. We've done, like I say, a ton of work in Times Square with a lot of these companies. And that's just a quick list of the different kinds of services that we offer. Um, I won't go through all of these because you guys can all get the PowerPoint online, I think Sarah said. So with that, that's maybe a little bit short, but that's the presentation. Sarah, I'll let you take
Awesome.
over.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'll take it from here since this is a NanoLumen slide. I'm sure that all of you registered for this webinar on our website. We also have white papers, blogs, case studies, even continued education with AIA available on our website. So check back. We update it often. Steve, if you don't mind going to the next slide. Perfect. All right, so I'm going to pass the torch over to Paul really quick. While Paul is just giving you a quick 2-minute briefing on nanolumens, if you guys have any questions, you can type them into the question bar on the side. We still have about 8 minutes left of this, so we'd love to take some questions. We've got Steve here ready to fire back some answers at you. So while Paul is sharing with us about nanolumens, get your questions in.
Outstanding. Well, thanks, Sarah. Just wanted to briefly say, on the screen you see our contact information. You probably found us on our website anyway, which is how you registered for this webinar. But there's our contact information. We certainly welcome people to come by our facility. If you don't know much about nanolumens, we're one of the largest manufacturers of indoor specific LED displays. We do a lot of very interesting custom projects. We love the strange stuff, the stuff that other people say can't be done. We sort of gravitate to that. But we do focus almost exclusively on indoor displays and mostly the higher resolution higher resolution displays. So 6 millimeter, 5 millimeter, 4 millimeter, et cetera. So we do have a variety of displays all around the world, not only just here in the United States, but on actually 5 continents. So we have a pretty broad reach, and we certainly love interesting projects, and we love working with our friends at Pixelfire. They make beautiful content that looks really great on our displays. So I think we do have a couple of questions. Sarah had a couple. One is, Steve, someone asked if you could clarify the 1 inch for 40-foot rule, exactly what you meant by that.
Well, what that means is that for every inch of, or for every 40 feet of viewing distance, so if I have let's say that I have a display that's just a 55-inch LCD, or if I had an LED that was, a 8-foot diameter LED, and my closest viewer was 100 feet away, then I would want to have a character height, minimum character height of 2.5 inches, because it'd be, 100 divided by 40 is 2.5. So you'd want to have minimum 2.5-inch character height in whatever content that you put if your viewer was 100 feet away.
Gotcha. So you mean that's text height is what 1 inch and 40 foot is.
Right. And that should be used as a rule when you're looking at how big of a display do I need. So
right.
You kind of want to see where's the sweet spot for the viewer, and then you want to figure out, once again, what do I want to say? If I want to put up, flight information, or if I wanted to put up, a lot of text, and my viewer was 100 or 200 feet away, that tells me that the content that I need to put up there is minimum 2.5 inch. So then, I can use that to kind of extrapolate, well, how big of a display do I need?
Gotcha.
I think a lot of times this might be a way where people decide, hey, what I really need is an LED because I want seamless, seamless display, and I want it to be bigger than just, whatever LCD can offer.
Great. The next question was on content for a short dwell time, for just short time in front of it. If I'm reading the question right, they're saying how many different pieces do you think that, like if you're going to string together, if I'm reading this right, they're asking how many different pieces of content should you do for a fairly short dwell time in front of it? Should it just be the same thing repeating over, or multiple pieces?
Well, that question, you have to ask yourself, what's my audience, before you can answer that appropriately. You need to know, is it an audience that is just going by this display, once a month, or is it once a day? Because if it's once a day, then you have an opportunity to communicate them different message every single day. Um, Usually with short dwell time situations, my recommendation is to go with shorter spots. You're not if you have a really short dwell time, you don't want to be running a loop of 30-second spots. You want your spots to be 10 seconds, and you want them to communicate a very short and brief to the point message. If it's an out of home situation, the cardinal rule of thumb before there was electronics with billboards was 6 to 8 words. So if you had a billboard on a 30-mile-an-hour street or on a freeway or something, the cardinal rule is 6 to 8 words is the max that you want to try and put up in any message like that. So I would say that that also applies for digital signage in a short dwell time situation. Hopefully that answers the question.
Cool. I think so. Does anyone else have any other questions? Those were those are the only two we had pop up immediately.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions coming in, then we will give you back 3 minutes of your time. Thank you so much again, everybody, for joining us for today's webinar. And Steve, I can't thank you enough for participating in this. It was hugely helpful and very informative, and I know that I got a lot out of it. I'm sure that our listeners did as well. So everybody enjoy the rest of your days. And like I said, this will be emailed out, the slides and the presentation. And I'm sure that just like you can contact us at any time with questions, that Steve feels the same way. So thanks again, guys.
Thank you.